How we doing, everybody? It's Wardy here. It's April 29th, 2025, and in today's Big Mets Update segment, we're going to continue the conversation that the Amazons are, without question, off to a roaring hot start this season. They are the first team in Major League Baseball to reach 20 wins, and for the first time in their own team history, have had 20 wins now in the month of April. A lot of historic things have happened the first month in for this amazing Mets team, including what we saw this past night in their 19-5 victory, headlined by Brandon Nimmo's biggest game of his entire career. Jeff McNeil and Francisco Alvarez's immediate impact in this Mets lineup coming back from their injury that had them sidelined the first month or so of the season. And how is Juan Soto faring as well over his last 10 games leading into tonight's series against the Arizona Diamondbacks? That is where we're going to get into individual player performances, along with who is expected to be the Mets' number 6 starter this Wednesday in Game 2 of the 3-game set against the Diamondbacks, and ultimately what the Mets will be getting in their matchup beginning later tonight again against the Arizona Diamondbacks in that 3-game set, as we're going to preview that entire series and have you guys all covered leading up to our pregame coverage today right around 6 p.m. Eastern, and then our postgame coverage directly after the ball game like we do every single game throughout the course of the season. Thank you guys kindly for smashing that like and subscribe on as you first chime in. It's always appreciated. And shout out to our amazing sponsor here at BetUS TV that has you covered with all the latest odds, picks, and lines here in the betting space. So make sure that you guys do it responsibly should you have interest. And if you guys want a pies bet as well, it's hard not to want to sprinkle a couple dollars on the Mets here at plus 550 currently when we look at the National League winner for 2025. Now, the Dodgers are without question the obvious favorite there at plus 140. Then you have the Mets at plus 550. The Phillies somehow, someway tied with the Mets at plus 550 and the Braves at 750. And all I'm asking is, where are the Padres? They got to be in this mix too, right? So if you guys want to buy a bet, or if you guys just have interest in sprinkling some dollars here, feel free to do it with our awesome friends at BetUS TV that, again, have you covered with the latest odds, picks, and lines. But whatever you do, make sure you do it responsibly, because that is first and foremost the most important thing. But as we get back into this one, everybody, let's first start the conversation today by piggybacking off of our excitement from this past night, which had everything to do with Brandon Nimmo. Take a look at this, everybody. In case you lived under a rock, in case you didn't pay attention to last night's game, Brandon Nimmo came to play. And my biggest takeaway right away from the Mets' 19-5 victory wasn't just Nimmo's dominant day with a home run and a grand slam and a double, all leading to a 4-hit game, 9 RBIs as well. And I do believe Brandon Nimmo is the first Met player ever to reach base the amount of times that he did in this ball game, drive in the amount of runs that he did as well, and have the total bases that he did. I believe that even supersedes what Carlos Delgado did with his 9 RBI game there in June 27th, 2008, I believe, against the Yankees and Yankee Stadium there for the Amazons. But it's not just Brandon Nimmo's heroics that we're going to highlight. It's more about the Mets lineup. And I spoke about this last night, and I'll say it again. I loved what Carlos Mendoza did with yesterday's lineup. I think we need to do that more often. Having Brandon Nimmo in the 6th spot, I think, is perfect. It takes a little bit of the pressure off of his shoulders by not being right there at 4 or 5 when you know you're going to have a lot of opportunities to score and drive in runs. And you're going to have that in the 6th spot because of how deep this Mets lineup is. Then when you have Alvarez and McNeil batting back-to-back at 6 and 7 and 8, and Acuna batting 9th. I love Luis Angel Acuna batting 9th, and then think that is perfect for him as a plate setter for the top of the order, and Lindor, Alonso, Soto, etc. And I'm loving what Brandon Nimmo provided for this Mets team this past day. He needed this more than anybody. And right when the critics have been louder than ever before with Brandon Nimmo, who's been pretty underwhelming with his offensive production since the second half of 2024 began, with a plantar fasciitis and the inconsistencies, no longer being the plate setter at the top of the lineup. Brandon Nimmo, though, a 4-for-6 game, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, had his OPS jump just about 100 points, which is absolutely insane. That's what happens when you have a monster day the way that he did, everybody. But most importantly, I should say, Brandon Nimmo has now put himself in a position that, while yes, we're not going to expect 9 RBIs every single time he's out there, what we do expect now is Brandon Nimmo to hopefully continue this hot streak, get some key production going in that 6th spot, because if it ain't broke, why fix it? So I fully anticipate Carlos Mendoza to roll with a very similar lineup yesterday than he did today. I think the only difference will be at DH, while I like Jesse Winker even in lefty-lefty matchups sometimes, because he's not, again, a guy that can't handle lefty pitching. They just platoon him because he doesn't favor as well as he does against right-handers. So expect maybe Starling Marte in there at DH. If it's not going to be maybe someone like Terens, should Alvarez get the catching spot again. But there are a lot of things to like with this Mets lineup, and I'd expect it to be relatively the same here for the majority of the series against the Diamondbacks. But Brandon Nimmo wasn't the only key standout this past night. He was just the most notable. But when we talk about other guys that certainly look great in their own right, we have to talk about another man briefly, and that is Jeff McNeil. Because Jeff McNeil, not only did he have a massive game this past night, but just a fantastic start to the season for Jeff. And as I said yesterday, and I'll say it again, I'm so happy to be proven wrong, because I've been a heavy critic of Jeff's throughout really a good chunk of his career, especially the past 2 years plus, where he's been underwhelming, not that consistent high contact hitting guy we expect him to be while he still has a couple years left on his contract. But Jeff McNeil, since being called back up for the Mets, has been absolutely fantastic. If we exclude that really bad defensive blunder that cost the Mets to a degree there in the first game of the National Series, where the ball just got under his glove because he was trying to make the quick turn, didn't happen, and CJ Abrams somehow scored all the way from first to home. Now we see Jeff McNeil since then, home run, a triple, 3 RBIs, a 333 average, and over 1,000 OPS. He has done everything and then some that you could possibly hope for. And the best part about Jeff McNeil's production, everybody, that we will hopefully see more of heading into this Diamondback series beginning later on today, is the fact that you're getting a Jeff McNeil that actually is capable in center field. And this is the big question. This is the one thing that we know that the Mets have been pondering for a while. Can McNeil handle center? Because if he can handle center, then they can really maximize their offensive output with their lineup with Luis Angel Acuna at second and Jeff in center. And we saw that in back-to-back games, and it worked in back-to-back games. So needless to say, everybody, as long as he's comfortable and not a massive defensive liability, expect to see Jeff McNeil getting more center field reps where Tyrone Taylor isn't maybe the favorable matchup. Even tonight, where they're facing Erod, I wouldn't be shocked if McNeil got in there in center field again, because I like the matchup. I could also see maybe why they like Tyrone Taylor there. Maybe you want Tyrone in center while Jeff at second base with Acuna coming off the bench. Even though I want Acuna to play every day and I like the pitching matchup for him tonight against the Southpaw, it doesn't change the fact that naturally the Mets are going to be a little creative throughout the course of each series and want to do what's best for them to keep guys fresh and also keep them hot. The way that Jeff McNeil certainly is coming back from injury. And Jeff isn't the only one that's been off to a roaring hot start coming back from injury, but it's great to see him absolutely rip a baseball with that torpedo bat as well. That can't be understated, and just how balanced and honestly not being that dark cloud that a lot of us fear that he would be when he came back to this Mets team, because there's no one more emotional that you could argue for this Mets team in the clubhouse with the on-field prog than Jeff McNeil. When he's riding high, he's awesome. When he's riding low, it's really bad, and he lets everyone know that he's yelling F-bombs down the first baseline and not playing his best baseball. Thankfully, we haven't seen any of that so far this season. I hope that continues, because that means we're going to get the best out of McNeil. The same way, everybody, we're now already getting the best out of Francisco Alvarez immediately. And this is really important to note, because Alvarez is doing everything that you could possibly hope for, immediately returning from his own injury. And what I love so much about what Alvarez has done is the fact that he has not by any stretch skipped a beat. Look at him in his first series back, just like McNeil, batting over 300, right around 1,000 OPS. This time on a home run, we also saw a double, 3 RBIs total in this series. He was productive every single game. In game 1, he threw out a runner as well as putting up a single. In game 2, he had the opposite field home run that you guys are seeing the highlights right now. In game 3, he had himself an RBI that we saw that was fantastic. That double that kind of got the party started for the Mets with their offense too. When we think of Nimmo and McNeil and all these other offensive takeaways in the 19-5 victory, don't get lost with the fact that Francisco Alvarez was helping get the party started in that ball game as well. So Alvy is doing everything and then some, and the Mets now have themselves a lethal catching tandem between himself and Luis Terens. Whoever is going to be out there catching, we have the confidence of knowing that they're going to, one, call a strong ball game for this starting staff, which continues to be stellar. And secondly, we know that both of them can throw out runners with quality at second base. Especially seeing Alvarez's quick pop time so far this year is very encouraging to see. As we know, he fluctuated with that last year, along with the power. Luis Terens is stepping up pretty much every game he's been a part of. Francisco Alvarez, too, is stepping up in what feels like every single game that he has been a part of. So a combination of all these players, everybody, and you look at the 1 through 9 in this Mets lineup, and you have to be ecstatic at the production level and also the potential for a 20-9 team still not having everything clicking on all full cylinders. And when I say not everything's clicking on all full cylinders, what I'm specifically referring to is what the Mets haven't gotten to this point from someone in Juan Soto. Because Juan Soto, everybody, he's been doing his thing. We can't sit here and say that Juan Soto hasn't been a productive player, because he has been. But Soto has not been by any stretch a key focal point in the Mets' success for the large majority of the first month of the season. And we're going to get into why exactly that is, along with what we can expect from him going forward. Because I told each and every one of you, heading into this 4-game series against the Nationals, I really thought that this would be the time where Juan Soto stepped up, drove out some home runs out of DC, the same way that he's done endless times in a ballpark that he knows better than anyone else playing on this Mets roster. Had so many great years of success with the Washington Nationals, and here we have him in his past 10 games. He has a 324 average, a 409, and I actually apologize, everybody, that is a complete typo. He does not have a 409 OPS, so disregard that. It is a 409 on base percentage is what I meant to put there. I usually don't put on base. I usually just put average and OPS, so that's why I got thrown off. And the reason why the OPS is in there, because it's not overly sexy, because Soto hasn't had a lot of power implementation the past couple weeks, right? We haven't seen him hit a home run since that series in Minneapolis against the Twins. That was a hot minute ago now, north of 2 weeks or so. So Juan Soto only has 3 home runs on the season, but he had 12 hits over his past 10 games, including 5 RBIs and 7 runs scored, a 324 average and a 409 on base percentage. Just to clarify that once more for anyone that isn't listening at this point for whatever reason, Soto is still pressing. We know he is. He's still trying to get his comfortability to spread for all fields and to go out there and to just be that dynamo we know he can be. And I think in part of the reason why it's been a slow roll for Soto has been because the Mets haven't needed him to necessarily be the guy. And Soto has been the guy plenty for many teams he's been a part of. And seeing Alonso have the MVP start he has, seeing Lindor up until this past series dominate the way that he is, even though Lindor still had a 3-hit game in one of the games of this series, so he's still doing fantastic things. And to see now guys like Mark Vientos finally starting to break out more. Looking at the depth of the lineup as well, 1 through 9, it's been tremendous. But the Mets have done this in large part without getting consistent key production from Juan Soto. And honestly, as a Mets fan, I have to say I'm really happy about that, and here's why. The Mets are 20-9 without Juan Soto really playing like Juan Soto yet. So just imagine where we can and inevitably will be once Juan Soto gets in a groove and he's hitting for high contact, but he's spreading for all fields, and he's such a force to be reckoned with that he's going to get Barry Bonds treatment at least every other time they're at the plate, along with ripping baseballs out of the ballpark, right? Because Alonso's going to continue to eat up pitchers for breakfast that want to pitch to him and don't want to pitch to Soto, because we've seen the early success that has had. Alonso's thrived on getting pitches more in the zone, and that's been great to see. Soto has fluctuated quite a bit so far this season with the pressure, the expectation, making $100 million this year alone between his salary and bonus, making $765 million as the base of the contract over the next 15 years. There are lofty expectations with Juan Soto in Queens, naturally, and he knows that, and I'm sure that's weighed on his shoulders to a degree to begin the season, but knowing that the boys are playing so well around him, regardless of what he does or doesn't do, has probably been easier for him to stomach to kind of just slowly but surely get in the groove that he knows he wants to be for this Mets team. Because once Juan Soto gets in the groove and becomes that player that we all know he certainly can be, then oh boy, does Major League Baseball have a problem. Because already the Mets are looking like a top 3 to top 5 team in Major League Baseball as is. But the notion that their best player, literally their best player on paper, isn't even performing beyond a clip that is right now, I'd say, above league average, but nothing crazy. Juan Soto is crazy good. He's insanely good. So the thought of him just getting started and the thought of this Mets team just getting started is why every fan should be ecstatic with the fact that they went 20-9 throughout their first month or so of the season, while having a pitching staff that does not command Sean Manaea or Frankie Montas currently. There are just so many things cooking for this Mets team right now, all while Edwin Diaz is still pretty fickle in the bullpen on what we're getting. Even though Diaz has been strong in his save situations this year, he hasn't been available on the back-to-back days like we'd hope, and he's fluctuated with his production. He's always walking like the first or second batter that he sees. So needless to say, not everyone is clicking on all full cylinders yet, and yet the boys here are off to a historic start to their season. Everybody, and I mean everybody, should be happy about that. But guys, now going on from talking about all those key player takeaways Great player takeaways, I might add. And I would love to hear from you guys in the comments down below. Who has been most notable to you as of late and why from the 4 to 5 players that we just broke down? Let's hear it in the comments down below. Because now as we get on to the Mets 6th starter, we're going to expand more thoroughly on him and what to expect for his likely Wednesday start for the Mets against the Arizona Diamondbacks and Corbin Burnes, because we're going to have a special guest for that segment I'm actually recording later today. That'll be posted tomorrow for you guys. But in the meantime, let's talk briefly here on Brandon Waddell, because we mentioned him this past day as it would be him or Jose Urena basically battling out to see who would be that 6th starter for this week's game. And come to find out, after Jose Urena was batting practice in the 8th inning against the Washington Nationals there in 3 innings for us, he is not going to be the starter more than likely for the Mets for that spot start, which now sets up Brandon Waddell. And for those that don't know Brandon Waddell, he's a fascinating story. He's in his early 30s. He's in Major League Baseball for the first time since 2021, where he had an inflated 6+ ERA across 3 different teams, I believe, that season. And since then, Waddell actually left the States and went over to the KBO, the Korean Baseball Organization, where he played in Korea, China, etc., and he had a lot of success there as a pitcher. Now he comes back to the States. The Mets signed him this past offseason as another kind of arm. They're not just throwing on the wall to hope it sticks, but rather a guy that has upside in them that they like about certain aspects of his arsenal, and is a lefty option that the Mets don't have an abundance of when you look at potential rotation pieces, with the exception of David Pearson. So adding that together, Brandon Waddell currently has right around a 1.5 ERA in over 20 innings so far in the minor leagues this year. He has over 8 K per 9, so right around a 2 to 3 walks per 9, so not terrible at all. And he has been pretty much as advertised as a solid 6th starter option for the Mets to consider when they want to consider one. And now, knowing that they want to give their guys an extra day's rest this week in this Arizona Diamondbacks series, and knowing that the Diamondbacks have really labored a bit so far this year against left-handed pitching in particular, and knowing that a guy like Ketel Marte, for example, isn't even going to be available because I believe he's still out with injury, this is the time for the Mets to seek that opportunity with Waddell and hope that they have similar success as he did with Justin Hageman, as Hageman was more than fine. And then what was it, the 3 to 4 innings or so that he pitched for the Mets against the Minneapolis, Minnesota Twins. And the only reason why the Mets lost that game was because Harrison Bader was a man possessed and we got walked off, if I'm not mistaken. That was a brutal end to that series, if memory serves me correct. But what memory also serves me is that David Stearns, Jeremy Hefner, Desi Drewskull, this entire Mets pitching lab has been nothing short of cooking big time so far this year. So I have faith in whoever they decide to call up from the minor leagues, even in a one-off, because at the end of the day, if they get rocked, it's like, okay, not a major league pitcher. Shouldn't be up here for the most part. Noted. And if they do well, okay, that's a guy we can turn to again in a 6-man spot should we wish to do so, especially where a matchup is not going to favor the opposing team with a lefty starter on the bump. All those things are okay, and all those things are stuff that I'm in favor of. So having said that, everybody, now let's get on to our final topic, our final key conversation today, which has everything to do with the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Mets. This series begins later on today, and we're going to have pregame coverage for you guys today. We will probably have pregame tomorrow as well. We just won't have it for the final game of the series because we don't do pregame at all for day games for either a 1:40 game or more often than not 4 o'clock games. We usually don't go out of our way to do it because, again, there are lesser people even interested and around usually throughout the week when everyone's busy working. So having said that, let's get into this series because tonight we got Mr. Erod, Eduardo Rodriguez, facing off here against David Pearson. It's a battle of the Southpaws where Erod has a 4.4 ERA and is 1-2 on the season, and Pearson is 1-1 on the season with a 3.29 ERA. Game 2, we expect to be Brandon Waddell, that I just said, the Southpaw coming from AAA Syracuse. And for the Arizona Diamondbacks, it's going to be the 0-1 Corbin Burnes with his 4 ERA on the year to see how Burnes fares against this Mets team. We know Corbin Burnes, former Cy Young Award winner, can never take him lightly. And the starter that I low-key have most concern with, even though I love the pitching matchup, and I think this is going to favor the Mets more than any other matchup this series. You got Kodai Senga and his 1.26 ERA and a 3-1 record on the season, facing off against East Coast native and Zach Gallen. I believe Zach is from New Jersey, if I'm not mistaken. Zach Allen with his 5.57 ERA and a 1.14 record on the season. Gallen has not been off to a good start at all, but it's Zach Gallen. He's a very good pitcher, and I believe he's in his walk year too. So there's a lot of incentive for Zach Gallen to go out and have himself a strong season. And he usually pitches well here, especially that we've seen on the East Coast in the past. So I know that Zach Allen's going to try to give his best start, and that's going from a night to a day game. So I already see that kind of being a pitcher's duel between the two. So we'll see what happens there for game 3. But game 2 is going to be the biggest test for the Mets because you have Corbin Burnes on the bump against a spot starter there for the Mets, the 6th man, and Brandon Waddell. And that's where the Mets offense needs to step up, and we have to hope that Waddell is able to give us at least a solid 4 innings so the bullpen doesn't get too taxed. But this is the risk the Mets are taking now by having a starter be brought in. You sacrifice your bullpen while allowing extra rest to your starters. And you just have to hope that your bullpen doesn't get too taxed over the next 48 hours leading up to Kodai Senga, which hopefully Kodai goes 6 or 7 strong for this Mets team there for this series finale this Thursday. But as it's been all year long, we know Citi Field is going to be rocking. It has been almost a sold-out crowd every single night there so far this year, which has helped in large part lead the Mets to a 12-1 record to begin the season at home, including a 7-0 homestand over their last 7 games, in which I had the privilege of being there for the final game of that past homestand where the Phillies were walked off by Starling Marte's broken bat single up the middle, and we did a live show from Citi Field itself there in the Cadillac Club. But as we talk further on the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Mets, let's take a look at the pitching, because right now the Mets are far and away the best pitching staff in baseball. And this is not just based on team ERA at 2.62, but team WAR. Per Fangraphs, the New York Mets have 5.8 total WAR out of their pitching. The next closest team is the Houston Astros, and the San Diego Padres tied at 4.5. The Mets have over a full win higher in their pitching lab than any other team in Major League Baseball right now. That is significant. They're not just pitching well, they're in another class from the next closest team. That is how much they've separated themselves a month into the season. Whereas when we look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, they're currently ranked 19th right now in total team pitching WAR with a 2, with a 4.38 team ERA. And when we look at team ERAs in particular, where do the Diamondbacks rank? Well, the Mets are right there at tippity top at first with 2.62, with the Padres behind them at 2.82, and the Diamondbacks are all the way down to 24th on the list at 4.38. Now, when we get on to offensive production between the Diamondbacks and the Mets here, right now Arizona's offense has been nails. Even without Ketel Marte, they're still one of the best offenses in Major League Baseball, including guys like Corbin Carroll, and I apologize, folks, had to sneeze there for a second. The Arizona has a 6 WAR already on their offense with a 245 average, a 335 on base percentage, and a 455 slug for 15% better than the average batters in baseball. But here come the New York Mets. They were lower to begin the season, but now they're in the top 10 in WAR at 4.7 that I see, with a 107 WRC plus, so 7% better than the average batter in baseball for their collective offense, and a 246 average with a 322 on base and a 410 slug. So they're really not too far off. But here's the demise when it comes to the Arizona Diamondbacks for the Mets. It is, and I say demise as is, it's the demise for the Mets rather. Arizona, since the start of last season, has averaged 5.5 runs per game. Why is that notable, you might wonder? That's because they've averaged more runs per game than any other team in Major League Baseball over the past year plus. So Diamondbacks offense is going to come to play. It's going to be headlined by Corbin Carroll. It's going to be headlined by all the key pieces in that lineup 1 through 9, not named Ketel Marte, as Marte has been out with injury, as we know. But with the exception of Marte, they have so many pieces working. Eugenio Suarez hit 4 home runs in a game this past week. He leads all of Major League Baseball in home runs currently. And Eugenio was battling out, feels like yesterday in 2019 with Pete Alonso for the most home runs out of the National League. Because remember when Alonso hit like 53? Eugenio wasn't far behind him. He hit north of 50 that year. So he's always been raking, even during his time from the Reds. And in his short stint there in Seattle, where I felt like they gave up on him too soon. Even in a park that is not a batter's park, I know Eugenio has one of the best swings in baseball when looking at power. Comes to the Diamondbacks is more of the same. So, folks, what do we have to look forward to in this series? Hopefully, Mets pitching continues to dominate the way that it has all season long. Offensively, they need a carry. We know that Soto needs to continue to step up, but we know the offense is going to be there for Arizona. The Mets pitching is going to be more exposed than ever before, potentially, in this series, especially Game 2 with Brandon Waddell. That could be batting practice for the Mets facing off against the Diamondbacks. So how the Mets respond from that early adversity, should this be the biggest test that they've had yet this season? That is what we're going to hopefully find out as soon as tonight. Hopefully it's a test the Mets find themselves passing. So Mets fans, thank you so much again for watching. I greatly appreciate it. We'll see how the rotations hold up between the two, along with the offense is backed along with it. And I will see you all again in our next form of content, which will be coming out again in a couple hours for pregame and then postgame here live on the WardyNYM platform. Thank you guys all again so much for watching. As always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.